let's get do it. Why don't you find a button on one of those keyboards and lay down some kind of beat?
I think we need to cut our losses when we get our family and Portal out of here.
Morty, good music comes from people who are relaxed. Just hit a button, Morty. Give me a beat.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. You gotta get swifty.
We got to get swifty with some more history. So, yesterday, I talked basically through the context of the exam, timings, and the course layout, as well as looking at the first question. But then I ran out of time, so we're going to look at 2A. So 2A is always going to be a sources question. That's not going to change. The format of the exam is always going to be the same. It's an 8 marker. So how useful are sources A and B for inquiry into blah? So in this case, it's battle injuries. We're going to keep that as our focus. So inquiry battle injuries by medical staff on the Western Front. Explain your answer using sources A and B and your own knowledge of the historical context. Now, guys, when I look at this source question, although man's got the sauce, no ketchup, what I actually look at is a little thing which I've developed, and it's called CUPA. And I do like a cheeky bit of CUPA. I like a cup of tea every single day. So, if we look over here, what I've got here is my CUPA. So, this is a good way to look at sources. It's my own little acronym. Other teachers use different acronyms, but this is what I use. So, CUPA, context. When was the source written or made? Now, they're all going to be primary sources from World War I. Provenance, so who wrote or drew the source? We haven't had a cartoon yet, waiting for that one. But yeah, we've had pictures and we've had written sources thus far. And utility, why is the source useful? And finally, analysis, what's actually going on in the source? You know, you have to actually read it or look at it for detail. So, looking at these two sources here, and I'm just going to close the door because those birds are twittering outside and it's extremely irritating. So now my cat can remain outside there. Sorry, guys. Right, okay. So, looking at this first source here, source a photograph showing a British casualty clearance station. Now, just a really easy way to apply a bit of your own knowledge. You should know that this was part of the chain of evacuation. It was a place that was most like a hospital. There would be about 7 surgeons there with quite a well-equipped nursing team of either IMC male medics or female nurses there. Now, please don't think that this was the FAMY. They hadn't been accepted into the British Army until 1917. So you'd be barking down the wrong thing there. So anyway, right. Surgery. So basically in the tents, now you can't see it, but I think that the surgeries would be happening in the tents. Be an easier place to make clean, less open, and the surgeons could focus in there on what they had to do. Although obviously we can't see that, which is a limitation of the source, but you don't have to talk about limitations. I've met the examiner, and you don't have to talk about limitations of the source, and in no way should you ever say a source isn't useful. Every source is useful. So anyway, we've got a variety of different injuries there. Now, this man, you know, is he a victim of a gas attack? Well, usually if a man's a victim of a gas attack, there'll be many men with a similar injury. So I think 70% of the injuries were to the head in terms of bullet wounds. We've got 2 men with broken arms here. We've got a man with this curious thing on his foot here. Okay, so is this trench foot or is it a self-inflicted wound? No, that's my question mark. Because certainly men did shoot themselves in the foot in order to escape the horrors of trench warfare. So we can see a variety of different injuries. We can see that the men are being treated by both women and men. We know it's along the chain of evacuation. We can see it's quite dirty, quite muddy, and these men also, they have non-urgent injuries. So what's happened is they've got the right care at the right time along the chain of evacuation. So, you know, these men, they might have to go to a hospital for a week's rest, but they'll be able to go back to the front. None of these men have life-threatening injuries. So there's that source there in terms of CUPA. Now, I actually prefer written sources, and I'm going to tell you why. Because on a written source, you can really get into your provenance. Okay, so you can really discuss who wrote the source and the kind of impact this has. So if we look at this one, we've got a really, really great giveaway. So from a nurse at the front, the First World War Diaries, yes, of Sister Edith Appleton, by Edith Appleton. Edith's handwritten diaries were kept by her family until they were published in 2012. Right, so they haven't been modified. They're in their exact form. They're not memoirs, so a memoir has been altered. She was a trained nurse working at a military base hospital in northern France. Here, Edith is describing the arrival of wounded soldiers at the hospital during her early days of the Battle of the Somme, 1916. Now, we know the Battle of the Somme is the deadliest battle of World War I, and actually the deadliest battle that the British Army ever fought in. We had 57,000 casualties on the first day, and we had something like, I think, 17 to 19,000 deaths on the first day alone. So it was a real bloodfest, a meat grinder, a real terrible battle to fight in. Okay, so, you know, with that in mind, she should write something about the wounded, and she has, wounded, exclamation mark. Hundreds and upon hundreds, some on stretchers, some being carried on, and some walking, all covered from head to foot in mud. Well, we know how dirty it was in the trenches. We had to deal with large numbers of horribly bad wounds. Some were crawling with maggots. And she hasn't written that maggots were in fact a great treatment for infected wounds, because they eat dead flesh and apply urea, an antiseptic, in places where man-made antiseptics can't get. So she's not commenting on the great use of maggots in treating wounds. So she probably doesn't know that. So while others were stinking and full of gangrene, one poor lad had been shot in both eyes. 3 men had died on the way to the hospital, and 2 had died before they could be treated. Okay, nothing unusual here in terms of deaths. But the RMC did do a great job with regard to getting men back to the front. 1.6 million men got back to the front due to their work. Now, remember, we're supposed to be focused on battle injuries, and all right, she's described a few things here, but really what I think is quite interesting, the surgeons are amputating limbs and boring holes into skulls at the rate of 30 a day. So, neurosurgery, okay? So this is, if you're thinking about battle wounds, this source is useful because we know that neurosurgery was happening in 1916. Now, when the Americans came into the war in 1917, a man called Harvey Cushing, he developed magnets. And those magnets would pull metal fragments out of men's brains, and obviously the brain is very sensitive, so that was a really really great way to treat that. So I suppose they were not able to operate on him. So perhaps in this July 13th comment here, there's the RMC were perhaps limited. If they can't, why can they perform a neurosurgery but they can't remove a lump of metal in a man's lung? Is it why? Is it because they had limited staff? Is it that they didn't have the technology in order to perform that operation? Is it because he was so weak he would have died? I mean, it's a limitation of the source, but again, the question is how useful are these two sources, not how limited are they? So with regard to an answer here, how useful are sources and be for an inquiry into the treatment of battle injuries, I'm just going to read through a model answer which I've done. Source A is somewhat useful as it demonstrates that the chain of evacuation was followed meticulously in order for the RMC to effectively treat what would reach 1.6 million men. The picture clearly shows the wide range of injuries soldiers would sustain over their bodies, from facial injuries, possibly caused by shells or snipers, to broken arms caused by explosive bullets, and even foot injuries, possibly trench foot or even a self-inflicted wound. Moreover, the men being treated have non-fatal injuries and are recovering and are receiving less urgent care from the nurses and the RMC medic, so rather than a life-saving injury, in brackets. This is useful as it demonstrates that the RMC prioritised and responded to fatal and non-fatal injuries. Okay, Source B is a diary written in 1916 by Edith Appleton, a nurse who served during the Battle of the Somme. This source is useful and very reliable as it is a private diary and therefore is trustworthy. This, coupled with the fact that it was written on the bloodiest day of British military history, whereby 57,000 men died on the first day, would suggest that the source will be very useful for inquiry into the treatment of battle injuries. Referencing the fact that 30 surgeries took place every day, this could be useful to a historian. It demonstrates how far surgery had moved on in order to save men's lives. Furthermore, mention of neurosurgery developed by Harvey Cushing, who used magnets to remove metal fragments from men's brains, is very interesting, as this development would have significant impact on soldiers during World War I. I have to leave there. Sorry, it's a bit rushed, and I've rushed through reading that. It's just that the memory that I have on my phone in order to make videos is limited to 10 minutes. So I am sorry that that was a little bit rushed, but you can pause it and have a little read through if you can read my writing. But ostensibly, you've got at least a 6 to 8 mark example there of how to get those marks.